Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Plastic Club exhibition salon featuring Roberta Gross. This one featuring our triple exhibition in the Bob Jackson Gallery. Fuite en Avant, excuse my French pronunciation. Let me introduce the artists. We have Dory Miller,
Marguerite Gelfman.
Marguerite Gelfman, thank you.
Marty,
Roberta, do you want to take over?
Do you want me to?
I've lost my cheat sheet.
Okay, and Rona Hoffmeyer. So welcome everybody to this Zoom salon. I'm honored to moderate this Zoom for these three extraordinarily talented artists. And they end up being artists with whom I have some ties. Dory and Dory and Rona had been part of the Emerging Artists program that we had started a couple of years ago, and they were in the PAFA show. And then I've learned that Marguerite is on Martha's Vineyard, as am I. So I will see her later at some time, I hope. But we're sharing the same kind of space. So in getting here, in starting this, I thought it was very interesting that the Plastic Club that was founded 125 years ago by professional women who were excluded from all male professional art societies, these women, Emily Sartain, Violet Oakley, and Alice Barber, formed a collegial group that was a supportive environment for the women. And what struck me about our history and the title of this show is that if you read some of the information that they have posted, they considered themselves a cohort. And I thought that was so appropriate for a show in the 125th anniversary of the Plastic Club, where we're celebrating the start of this collegial cohort of women that were supportive for each other. So I'm going to ask each one of them separately before I go into their individual presentations. Why did you become part of this cohort? What it meant and means for you as an artist? So we can start with Marguerite.
Sure. I joined, well, it was really Dory who was wonderfully supportive of saying, let's get a group of us together. And we were in an MFA program together. And there was a rigorous practice of art and critiques and really just sharing your work with lots of different people. And so I jumped at the opportunity because I think being with fellow classmates and women of who are middle-aged like myself, it became an opportunity to really dive deep into the work and share this experience together. Yes.
And Rona, how about you? Rona, can you hear?
Yeah, sorry, I was on.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's me. Yeah. So Dory invited me to join earlier in the year in March. And at that time, we just moved from Philadelphia to Seattle. We moved into our house in December. I just unpacked my studio. And when she spoke to me about what the show was about, I immediately jumped at the opportunity as well, because the body of work that I ended up creating for the show was work that I've been thinking about for a very long time. And it's just, I've been putting it on the back burner because there just was so much going on in my life. But with this invitation, it was just what I needed to get back in the studio and immediately start to dig in. So, yeah, and, you know, I could very much relate to the topic as well, so.
Well, being a part of a cohort really was, and a cohort that was going to be having exhibition possibilities was really very important. I didn't know that your work was just for this show. When we get to her slides, it's really pretty amazing body of work there. Dory, so you're the organizer of the cohort, and what was your motivation?
Well, it started during COVID, because Marnie and I were in an MFA program at PAFA, and we had a group of us, we were just kind of, the nickname was the PAFA PAFA War Buddies, we called ourselves, because our last semester was on Zoom because we 2020. And we just stayed in touch, and we had these Zooms, I think every week at first, and then every month. And then we knew that we wanted to have a show together, and there were 5 of us all together, and it was originally supposed to be 5 of us, and the others, like, life happened, they moved, they got jobs, things happened, and Marnie, it was left with me and Marnie. And then I just ended up talking to Rona. I think I went to visit Rona at her studio before she moved, and just felt, you know, we were in school together. She was in the BFA program, so we knew each other around school, but this was a really nice connection. And then when it seemed like the others were not going to be able to participate, I asked them all, and I asked, you know, Marnie, if what they thought about Rona, and everybody was like, absolutely invite her into this show. So that's
absolutely was exactly the right response. I'm glad that she is here. Well, the title of this, and again, like Bob, excuse my French, is Fuite en Avant, fleeing forward. And I was intrigued by the notion that it's fleeing forward as opposed to the usual expression going forward. So if each of you would just address why you had this, why the sense of fleeing was appealed to as part of the title for your show. So we'll start with Marguerite again. Marguerite, do you want to be called Marty?
I want to be called Marnie, please.
Okay, Marnie. Yes. Go ahead.
I think for me, life always, I always find it curious that we get one stage down in our life and we're on to the next. Once we have one thing down, we're always moving forward. And so fleeing forward kind of worked for me. And I think we've all experienced wonderful and terrible things in our life, and we have no choice. You have to keep moving forward in many chapters. So for me, this was perfect because we're not always planning what happens next.
When you wrote your answer out to me, it actually was a very personal response also in terms of personal things happening. Yeah. I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing that.
Yes, I mean, I had to have an operation this past year, and you know, it really, as a woman, it was a hysterectomy. So I had to really kind of delve deep into different feelings around being a woman, my body, the area that created children in me, and what that meant spiritually and physically. So my work for this exhibit was all about that. And it was like a visual diary.
Yeah, and I think when we get to the slides and hear her discussion of that, it'll become even clearer. And, you know, congratulations for your courage about exploring it and sharing it.
Thank you.
Rona?
Yes, I can relate to what Marnie is saying in terms of there is so many phases to women's lives. And every time there is the beginning and an end of a phase, and you have to almost reinvent yourself. As when you become a mom, you reinvent your identity. When your children leave the house, you start to reinvent your identity. Maybe like in my case, I went back to school in my late 40s. I became a student again. That was an adjustment in itself. You know, so the fleeing forward is, you know, life, it sometimes feels to me, you know, that saying the days are long and the years are short, right? So it is a flight forward. And in the recent, just this past year, you know, I mean, actually since 2020 with COVID, with graduating from school, big changes in my life where we moved, you know, there's just always something, you know. So I think as a whole, and as a woman who had to reinvent herself over the years, we've moved countries, we've moved cities, we've done so much, you know, it just goes almost without saying. I don't know, I just feel it very much on a personal level as well.
Well, also I think very interesting after looking at all of your works is reinvention is something that you all do. It is how you approach art, which is so wonderful and which I found inspiring in getting prepared for all of this. I mean, for me, that was actually, I thank you. So I want to start with Marnie Golfman's work. And we're going to start with 4 JPEGs that are not in the exhibit because I want to, these are from her website, because I want to have, you have these in mind as you look at what she presented for the exhibit. So it would be, there should be 2 pictures of flowers and 2 pictures of people.
Bob, are you there?
This is not in the slideshow?
It's in the slideshow. It's not in the main exhibit.
Oh, okay.
I probably misspoke.
More likely I misheard.
No, I'll take credit for that. So this is, you see family, you see 3 children, you see the cards in back, they're either holiday cards or kids cards, the parents so proudly put up. The composition is strong. You clearly know these are people. You have colors that are really, you have darks, you have lights, you have values. It's a very well thought out composition. Next one. Here you have a couple closely sleeping together. Clearly a portrait of a male and a female, clearly in a very close position. You recognize these as faces. You have shadowing and shading and just a really very intimate, clear picture. And then the 2 flowers. So this is, while they may be abstract flowers, you look at that and you don't say, hey, that's an airplane. You know that it's flowers. And, even though there's calligraphic marks and, the atmosphere may not be realistic, you look at that and say, oh, those are beautiful, colorful flowers. Okay, next one. And again, same thing, again, where these are not depictions of it, maybe a bouquet that she was looking at, but, it's abstracted from reality. It's not, photographic, but nevertheless you go, oh, isn't that a nice bouquet? I'd like that. Okay, so let's go on then to her first slide in the exhibit. Not in this. Okay, so this is called the Garden of Eden, and it's a series of 6. So you have in mind what she did before, and you have in mind if you look at what she did here. And I'm going to be overgeneralizing about, when I looked at her website and then I looked at her pictures, but generalizations are useful to make, you have to make conversation, right? And so you make generalizations, but I think generalizations have some truth to them. The work in this exhibit is more what I would call akin to drawings, and they share the virtue of drawings. There are more spontaneous, there are fewer layers that are covering what came before. We don't see the early mark making. It's maybe less precious because it's on pieces of paper. It's more about being exploratory than completed. The other pictures that we saw were definitely very completed pictures. So if you can, you look at these, and my immediate impression, these were the first ones I saw of her after looking at her website, was, impression of these spontaneous shades of red flowering, gardens of motion, of these flowers and some bodies occupying space. There was plenty of space around. So there was a lot of sense of breathing and of movement. Movement was emphasized to me also because a lot of the lines were diagonal. And like I say, the breathing space gave it a vitality and a breathing room. So I wondered if she had created these in one sitting, where they were created in response to being in this exhibit, or did she bring in some earlier pieces? And were these just ideas that she was going to use in some larger works? Multiple questions, but you get the theme. Tell me about them.
So I think I started with the flowers, and they were done in one series. And then I think flowers are metaphors for bodies as well. I mean, we all have it, they have the same aging process where, bud and then full bloom, and then of course, cratering in on itself. So I think this series, the bodies were really quick. Probably in 2 settings, I did the collage and painting on one, and then the kind of decomposing on the other. I was also at this point looking a little bit at Louise Bourgeois' work and Tracy Emin's work, and thinking about how can I, the color red, blood, kept coming up for me with painting, but I kind of wanted to just use this as a vehicle to kind of heal. And art really is, I think I kept a visual diary after this operation. So these were pieces that it was kind of like I was trying to make sense of everything, and I did through painting. But yes, you're right, they're more sketches and loose, and it was almost like it wasn't a set composition, it was more plain and kind of exploring and just trying to put feelings on paper.
Which I think, I mean, when I was going through your whole series, one of the things I liked was the contrast was with the finished paintings and the exploratory paintings. We all need to do both of those. And if we stop nurturing our imagination and our soul by not drawing, by not sketching, by not exploring, by not taking risks, we probably dry up. And for me, this was very, very inspirational because of that. And it said to me, get drawing, get exploring. So you don't need to apologize about it. It's an important phase of being an artist. And I thank you very much for participating in this and sharing these.
Thank you.
Her next one, slide number, well, my number is off now, but Venus. So this work I liked on many levels, including the fact that she was drawing on wallpaper. If some of you have heard some of Patricia Ritchie's lectures about the early women and their careers, they made their livelihood by being designers for wallpaper. Some of them did magazine covers, but others did wallpaper because that was the only thing that they let these women do before they start forming the Plastic Club and looking at other opportunities like murals, etc. So in this piece, the wallpaper motif, the flower, is echoing her theme of fertility and flowering. The strong lines of the Venus give a focus, as well as her calligraphy with blue lines that move your eye around the body and really focus you. And, you know, it's a very lively piece, but it's also very centered on the body. So I was curious whether she had started off with the idea of just picking up a swatch of paper. Did she have a lot of these swatches? I presume she has lots of paper. Did she start with this idea of putting on a Venus, or did she start mark making and then it sort of formed?
I think with this, I started with a big piece of wallpaper, and I knew I wanted to paint the figure, the female figure, and I started painting, but it became almost sculptural to me, like tactile. And I added different colors and the outline was there. And then I think I started adding more kind of different papers on top. A lot of them are metallic. And I really liked how this piece had a lot of metallic in with it. I thought it added a different element. And it was rough, but it was almost cathartic. I think painting like this was almost a way to kind of move your arm in big gestures and play with materials and add and subtract. And just, this was a very cathartic piece for me.
It's interesting to say, I mean, because some of her pieces are small. And again, you could be very exploratory. They're not precious. This is a large one and it's more muscular, more involving. So that's an interesting comment. The other thing is, you have a rather personal connection to wallpaper, don't you?
Yes, I worked at my first job out of college was at Macy's, and I designed table linens and rugs and sheets. And so I think I go back to the idea of maybe a background or a wallpaper or a design. And in addition to that, I think I can jump into the image quicker when I have a background that's already there. And then it's a push-pull of what's revealed and what recedes.
Right. No, this is a very strong piece. I like it a lot. So the next one, Vessel, a series of 15. So here we see a substrate divided into 3 rows of 5, focusing on the female torso, the breasts and the vaginal area. And so I was wondering if she first started off just with the idea that she's going to divide a paper and have those many vignettes, or did she bring these in, have the paper and then divide it? Did she work on one section at a time and then go back because one section influenced another? I thought about that when I saw the 2 phthalo greenish sections, wondering if doing one influenced the other. She went back and put in the green. And some portions have a written section. And did you write out those first? You knew that you were going to include those, or did you respond to what you did and put them in?
I responded later. This series was on like school paper. It was on not watercolor paper. So this was an opportunity to just take 15 pieces of this paper and play with different shapes and different viewpoints and different styles. I was a children's teacher, art teacher for 20 years. So I think I enjoy the idea of multiples and series and plane and how can you change it, morph it. Some have more outlines, other it's more about the interior. But I picked Clarissa Pinkola Estes quotes from Women Who Run with the Wolves, because it just also spoke to me as, would you like me to read one real quickly?
Absolutely. You can read it slowly.
Okay. Okay. The top one with the red and yellow and orange in the breasts. That one says the body remembers, the bones remember, the joints remember, even the little finger remembers. Memory is lodged in pictures and feelings in the cells themselves. Like a sponge filled with water, anywhere the flesh is pressed, wrung, even touched lightly, a memory may float out in a stream. So it's all about muscle memory, like how we hold our pain or do we release it? And I think this was a great opportunity for me to just play with those feelings and just let them out. Like it was like, it poured out of me. The series, I think I did in one swoop.
Very interesting. So, and did one piece influence the other? Did you go back and forth between the pieces, or you finish one and just move on?
I just move on.
Okay.
I would just move on. It was almost like I was just, playing with it, but the words came later, and it was almost setting them up and looking at them and thinking, I love to play with words and images. I think mixing senses too is really fun. So this kind of came naturally to me to add words.
So you, I think in chat later, we should probably put the spelling of the poet. So other people,
Yes.
if they want to research that. So we'll make it available for everybody, because obviously she's just very beautiful in terms of her expressions and her articulate
Yes.
ability to capture our sense of ourselves. So the next one is broken.
Yeah, emotion.
Oh, sorry. In fact,
It's okay.
that's, yeah. Oh, okay. So this is a series of 9. And I was always curious, sometimes, in art school, they say, write out these emotions and then go and do a picture. So I asked her whether or not the list came first, or she was writing and, or she was drawing and painting, and she start then focusing on the emotions. And the other thing that I thought was interesting, if you look at the center piece, very, very abstract, as well as the one next to it is pretty abstract. I mean, they're all pretty abstract. And so I was, but some are a little bit more recognizable, the top layer, the left-hand side. So I was wondering what was going on between abstraction and more representational. And I won't go, I had thought that one set of breasts were eyes, but I was corrected on that.
But I love that.
That is, well, it is sort of interesting. I think
It is.
I thought that she was doing, I was wondering why she started doing faces.
Oh, that's great. No, I think this.
Go ahead.
No, I think this series also has a background, like the stripes are part of a lot of it. And the last one in the middle, I juiced up the colors. They're like, pastel-y and hot colors. And so the colors are different, but it still has the dark black and navy blue. And the middle one was the last one. And that I just started to like cut up paper and kind of play in a different way. But I wrote the top one has something that I wrote, and it kind of pulls this together, I think, which I'll read it to you. It's, we create to digest all that has happened to us. We relive our experiences through color and shape. Memory runs along present day, and we reassemble the pictures in our mind on paper with pen and paint, circle and recircle our actions and reactions to what has come before, and are prisoners of our body breaking free. We are rewriting our story so that we are no longer in pain. So this was like a pumped up response and a more abstract response.
Yeah, no, it's lovely. I would love, if you would explore further that center thing. Those abstractions are really compelling, as well as other, but particularly compelling probably by not being just part of the, just all of the abstraction. It's like, oh, okay, what's here? And then it makes you go back and look at the others. So it has a focal response by including it in there and being different. Okay, now we'll do broken. Okay, so here you see a very abstract all over background, which is painted on a paper cloth. And this is another large piece, 34 by 33. And she has objects as well as paper pieces. So she has fragments of glass and pottery. And so I was curious about the actual selection of the pieces that she included. Was it about beverages and a mealtime on purpose? Or was it an homage in some way to women, as many of them are glass makers and potters in particular? And okay, go ahead. And then later on, you'll see she has a posting of an Instagram about broken. Go ahead.
Well, I think this started, believe it or not, the painted tablecloth I had from years ago, because I had a dinner party where I painted the tablecloth and just thought it'd be fun to eat off of something like that. But the glasses were all glasses that I had broken. And the bottle, I kind of attached different shards of glass. And I thought it was interesting that the hope in the mug was also broken, but that piece was it was intact in one piece. And then I chipped a china plate and I painted on it and attached pieces, but it also is a metaphor for us, for our bodies. I mean, you can't use that glass because you can't hold water or anything else in it. You can't use the mug or the bottle or the plate, really. So it's kind of like, how do you keep this vessel? And it's a take on the body, I think, in some ways. So that was my response, but it is kind of a joyous background color, and yet everything is broken.
Well, but it seems to reflect, you seem to be, both a very somber person, a serious person, but also a joyful person that is able to be pretty optimistic. So it is a self-portrait in many ways.
Yes.
So the next one, because if you go to the next one, I'm just going to acknowledge it and then move on, because these are very strong pieces. As you can see, they're very dynamic and they're there. But I'm going to move on because she has more pieces. So she has a posting. The next slide is, she has a Instagram post, which I urge all of you to read. I just took a quote out of it. I think I took a quote out of it. Oh yes. I took a moment to look at the odd shards of jagged glass that gleamed like stars on my wood floor, realizing what every artist realizes. This mistake will be a portal if I let it. That was such a wonderful thought. I mean, the whole piece is wonderful. And again, people should read that. But I'm using that one line as an entry into the next, I think is your photograph. So the photograph is one of my favorite pieces that you did there. I love it. As people do, I imposed something realistic. For me, I could see a figure, maybe because the exhibit had to do with figures, but I see in the upper right-hand corner, it looked like a head, the sort of rectangle, the large rectangle in blue glass, that shard looked like torso, and then skinny little legs. But that's just the mind tries to impose reason on abstraction. So could you tell us about this really quite wonderful piece?
Yes. This was a glass. I mean, I was breaking a lot of glasses, but this was a glass that fell on the floor. And I looked at it and thought, okay, I can't believe I just broke this glass. And then I started photographing it. And then I kind of thought, am I going to get really upset about this, or am I going to let it take me on another journey in a creative way? And I think that's true for all of our lives, really. You can get stuck in something, or you can say it's a portal. Let's go. Let's use this as fuel for something that's coming up. So that's kind of how I felt about that. But I was breaking a lot of glass.
Well, that's why I say is that, you know, this exploration that she's sharing with us is totally inspirational, is to look at the broken glass as a portal. Wow. Instead of cursing like, damn it, just pick it up and take a picture and you have a piece of art. How great. So the next slide, recovery. So this is a series of color photographs. And when I looked at the pieces, they reminded me of some of the pieces that were in some of your series. So I didn't know if these were ones that you had done for the show and that they were part of the, like the 9s or the 12s or the 15s, or what was this and why was it called Recovery?
This actually, all these pieces are in the show, and it was part of my recovery. I think by creating and doing art, it kind of helped me kind of get out of the funk of this operation just happened to me. So like in the top one, I'm in a nightgown, and then it progresses to like, I'm out and about, I'm going like, so it kind of was a journey. And in 2016, I had done an exhibit in New York of photographs of my feet every day. It was like a visual diary to record where I landed. And it was flip-flops and boots and high heels and whatever, but it was also a composition of the area that I had landed. So it is natural. It's natural for me to put my feet into things. So, and it's a reference to like where I landed, so to speak.
Well, you know, that is so funny because usually when people say, oh my God, I stepped into it, I put my foot into this, they mean that apologetically, they mean they messed up. And look at this, this is for you as exploration in art. I mean, wow, that's great. So were these pieces then reassembled as like the compositions of the 9s and the 12s, or are these individual pieces? These are reassembled.
These were reassembled
okay.
into the different series.
Okay. That's, and it was called Recovery. Why? Like, did you answer that?
Just because it helped me. It got like I kind of it was a self-portrait in a sense, in that my feet were in it, my body was in it a little bit, and I was doing my work again. So recovery was part of recovery.
Great. So on your website it says that you're a teacher. You've been a teacher for many, many years. Has being a teacher no, that's all right. Has being a teacher influenced your art? And
yes, I create like a child. I don't like, there are no rules. I use lots of materials. You know, I don't really believe there's a right and a wrong to anything. So I think it's all about self-discovery, exploration. There are no mistakes. If you do something and you're not happy with it, turn it into something else. So I kind of feel like working with children gave me that gift.
Well, and I'm sure you gave the gift back to the children of courage. One of the worst experiences I had was the art classes I had in school, where there was only a right way. And I never drew again or painted again until I was in my 50s because of that horrible experience, that it was only a right way. And actually the first teacher I ever had said, wrong is right. And I said, okay, we're here. So I'm sure your teaching was a gift to the children with your attitude.
Thank you.
So do you have some current explorations or projects that you're working on, or
know, I don't, but I'm on Martha's Vineyard, which means I'll probably be painting the beach and the sea. And I think the nature is so inspiring here that, you know, I'll probably end up just painting dirt roads with leaves and tunnels of leaves and all sorts of things. So I'm kind of excited to have time here. And I think this exhibit was wonderful in that I think it gave us all back a rigor to our art practice and something to work towards. And I think that will spill over into the fall.
Oh, that's great. And Dory, that was great for you to organize everybody and give them that impetus. That was great.
Roberta, can I just say something really quick about the top picture of Marnie's? When I saw that picture, there's a beautiful vulnerability. I knew that she was just fresh out of the surgery, and there's this beautiful lace, very feminine nightgown, and that vulnerable little foot. And I begged her to just get the pictures into the show. And then Rona and I, when we were installing, we decided to put them on the floor outside of Broken, so that you are literally have the same point of view as Marnie looking down at her feet.
Ah, very
Mm.
interesting.
Yeah.
So these are not on the wall.
They're on
No.
the floor.
That's great. There may be more feet in the pictures.
Yes.
It may be a collegial experience when you pick them up later.
Yes, but it's also that none of it's precious too. Like
Right,
it's
right. It'll be very
Yeah.
interesting to see that, if people were careful or
Yes.
not. So, Rona Hoffmeyer. So, Rona is an artist that can do it all. I mean, she's pretty amazing. When I went on her website and explored what she does, she's a classically trained singer. And I urge people, if you weren't at the opening where she did do some pieces, go on her website and you can listen to pieces. Her voice is just beautiful. And she's also a sculptor and an installation artist. And her sculptures and installations at first blush appear very humorous, but she's exploring themes that are related to women's fight for equality, whether it's political or cultural. And if you look at like one of the installations, E Pluribus Unum, it's 100 hand-painted bras, or the issue of containment, emotional supplication, and stereotyping in the piece Domestic Goddess. All these pieces are both a little humorous and yet they're very serious. And so I urge you to look at her website because it's just very interesting to see how she takes everyday objects, puts them in a very funny way. Your first thing is a smile and a laugh and a chuckle, and you go, oh yeah, right. I see what she's saying. So look at her website, and you'll see this as we go through her materials. So the first one is security blanket. So you look at this, if you don't look at what the materials are, oh, isn't this lovely? It's a hanging of a regular paper rectangle stitched together in a grid, very beautiful piece, very abstract, very ephemeral looking. But it's a construction made of used makeover removal wipes. So it's like dirty trash you use to make this beautiful piece. So what attracted you to using this particular material? And that it was used, besides the fact that it provides some color and texture, what is the significance to you that the wipes were used?
So the series I created for the show that I basically started, and I'm not done with it yet, but is called Domestic Goddess, which is an extension of an installation I had before. And we can talk about that later because I want to get to this specific piece. So within that context, I made a whole group of works that are quite narrative, and this falls to me in that category. So people since the dawn of humanity have adorned themselves with, whether it's mud, makeup, jewelry, cloth, that's human nature, right? And for me, this is an exposure of vulnerability as you are removing this makeup off your face. In this case, I'm thinking of women, of myself wearing my makeup. It makes me feel better. It makes me feel like I look a little better. I can present myself to the world. And we use makeup for so many reasons, going into battle. Some cultures do that, in the past. So anyway, there's a whole history behind it. And in this case, removing it, you are exposed. And that's where the title comes from, security blanket. I'm creating a security blanket out of these used makeup remover wipes that have stripped me from that little bit of a mask or barrier almost that I've put on my face between myself and the world as I go out.
Remember what I said at the beginning? You have things that make you smile, and yet they're very deep. And I think you'll find this as we keep going on.
And children have it too, babies have their little blankie that they get attached to. That is, there's a little bit of security. It gets them to go to sleep. So anyway,
Yes, mine didn't give it up till he was 5 because we forced him to. The rule, he got to use it. We said until you're 5. As soon as you turn 5, you have to throw it away. So we kept dreading turning 5.
Oh, before
Go
I
ahead.
forget, the other thing also, the act of hand sewing. So within the domestic goddess theme, that is traditionally a very feminine activity. And back in the day, I think even back, not even 100 years ago, it was considered an essential feminine ability to have as you go into marriage and have children, is to be able to sew. So that was also one of the reasons why I wanted to sew it together with my hands, as kind of a throwback to that within the domestic goddess concept.
Thank you for the addition. So the next, I'm going to have you go through them 19 through, is this 19 on, I don't know what the numbering is. It's 19. If you would go 19 through 23 and then go back to 19, these are all, we get close-ups of this one. So that's 20, 21, 22. Maybe there's more, 23. Is there one more in that series? No, okay. So go back to the top one. Okay. So this is called in service sense. And there are many, many objects that make up this disparate objects making up this very intriguing sculpture. We have deconstructed paper shopping bag, trash bags, tool, dry cleaning hanger, kitchen twine, used duster, guinea fowl feathers, clothespin, dirty dryer sheets, coffee, cocoa, cornstarch, egg tempera. So she was cleaning house. So the overall first impression of this particular sculpture when I looked at it, oh, that's a female figure. Maybe it was representing a wedding, the wedding day from that fancy looking gown. And that the dreams of this bride got immersed, submerged, or otherwise taken over by everyday activities of daily life and the materials of daily life. So that was my response to it. But as you go through different slides and you get close-ups, it's obviously a lot more complex of things that are going on. So start with the overall impression, and then I'm going to let you control the speed, going through each of the slides, Rona.
Okay.
You just say next. So start with the first one again.
Okay.
If we could start with 19. Go ahead.
Okay, so this was actually the very first piece I created when I started the series in March. And it's important to understand what I was looking for. So domestic goddess, that 2 words says a lot in itself, but I was interested in materials, using everyday materials that me as a homemaker are confronted with and has been confronted with for years, whether it is dust or a duster, paper bags, shopping bags, trash bags, dryer sheets, etc. So that for the entire series, that is my focus, is that the materials are incredibly important. And then secondly, I'm very interested in the connection between or the homemaker and fine art, and where these things come together. And the reason for that, when we immigrated in 1998 from South Africa, I was not allowed to work. And so at least for the first 5-6 years before I got my green card, it was just a visa thing. And I had my children and became this homemaker, this domestic goddess. And the repetition of homemaking, that cycle of over and over doing the same thing day in, day out, week in, week out, and so forth, is not, it's kind of challenging. So back at PAFA, we were reading the Feminist Uncanny, sections of that in an art history class I was taking with Dr. Kevin Richards. And in the piece that we were reading at the time, she was definitely talking all about this repetition, this labor of love, the struggle of confinement within this space of home. And the light bulb went on. I'm like, yes, I know what she's talking about in this essay. And during this phase of my life where I had no choice but to be in the house, and I had to perform all these household duties and responsibilities, I always had this intense longing to make art. So I would be physically busy cleaning while I was singing maybe an aria and thinking of pieces that I would love to paint, because I have a lot of ideas come to me on a regular basis, which then created that tension. So with this series, I thought, well, if I restrict myself to materials that are everyday household item materials as the domestic goddess, and bring in my fine art desire, let's see what can happen. So the first thing I did was that apron, I deconstructed the shopping bag, and I had no drawings, I had no plans for any of the work that I made. I literally showed up in the studio and I said, let's see what happens. I'm just going to be present. And I gathered a whole bunch of things in my house and I just started making. I started cutting. And this piece, the apron part, was not intended to be an apron, but I looked at it and thought, this looks like an apron. Okay, what's happening next? And then I wrote a shopping list on the top. And I decided, okay, it needs something, let's do kitchen twine, so I've sewed, again, the kitchen twine down the front. We can go on to the next slide. So there is the bouquet, and the piece was kind of telling me what it needed next, to be quite honest. It kind of made itself in a way. I had this dirty duster that I used in the house, and I wanted to separate the dusty bits, and so I would put coffee on it to kind of make it stick together, and then the feathers are kind of a bit of a throwback to my home country, South Africa. They're from there, it's guinea fowl feathers from there. And I had scrubby, the aluminum that you scrub, the pot scrubber, and I just saw it needed to go there. So it organically got, so the next slide, yeah, and then the apron needed, I just saw a chessboard. So I painted the chessboard, and I painted it with coffee and egg tempera and cornstarch. And I wanted to put the chess pieces on there, because then I started thinking about relationships and how, again, the unspoken sometimes, the domesticity, femininity, what roles do people play within their long-term relationships? The king and the queen, the pawn that falls over. That little bit at the bottom is a dryer sheet that I dunked in dirt water from my dust from my vacuum. And I wanted to sew that on as a little frill, So next slide. Yeah, there you can see it as a whole, the dry cleaning for the hangers, for shoulders. And then eventually the skirt happened with trash bags. And I wanted it to be, I just needed more, and it told me I want more, and I added things. So it was very experimental. And next thing I know, there it was. Yep. So that's sort of the story behind creating this. Yeah.
So were you during that, before that, when you were in South Africa, had art classes? Did you do art at all, or it wasn't until this period of almost imprisonment in the house that you?
Sounds very bad, right? Yeah.
It does.
No, I took art in high school. Actually, throughout school, I've always been making as a child. Actually, I was writing, singing, drawing, painting, making things. And then I actually had a career in advertising by the time we moved to the United States. I did sing. I started formal training in classical singing around 16, continued until my mid-20s, and then at that point decided that I did not want to pursue a full-time career as a performing artist. So the art has been with me, but not on this level. And it was only in 2005 when my children were still quite small, but at that time I started painting. So I've been painting for a long time, and then the full immersion really came when I went to PAFA in 2017 and did my BFA with him.
Great. Okay, the next slide.
Oh yeah, that's just a
Go back. Did you address that one?
no, there was nothing more. I think I
Okay.
did pretty much everything. Yeah.
So the next one is entitled I Do, Dust from Vacuum Cleaner and the Cake Stand. So I just had a smile when I first saw that one. I just laughed. I went and showed my husband, he laughed. It was just wonderful. So you see this cake-shaped vacuum cleaner dust sitting atop a glass cake stand. And I assume that it's a take on the traditional wedding cake by the title I Do. And certainly it's a far stretch from that sweet confection that most people have. It's like a journey from the wedding cake, the cutting of the cake, to the everyday drudgery of household tasks, which often fall to the wife. And I do have to have a confession right here. It is my husband that does the vacuuming and the laundry in our house. I don't vacuum. He's chortling in the background. Don't make beds either, actually. Anyway, can you discuss this piece, including how you came up with the idea?
Yeah, they definitely domestic gods out there too, that's for sure. Yes, about the title, let's start there because I've been thinking about it. I actually want to change that a little bit to two I do's. The one where you can put the emphasis on the I or on the do, depending on the viewer and where they see themselves within that. It just came to me, the idea just popped into my head that I want to make a cake out of dust because I do bake a lot. In fact, years ago, I had for a while a small baking company where I was baking these very traditional biscuits we get in South Africa called rusks or biscuit that you dunk in tea and coffee. So baking has been a big part of my life for throughout, and at one time very much so. And just the whole idea of like food and especially baked goods, it always smells delicious. It's nurturing. People love it. I just love the juxtaposition. I found that very appealing. And then the ready-mades, I do like to kind of bring ready-mades in on some of the pieces. So the cake stand, I'm not making it. I just bought it. It's served on this platter.
And if you got it from Marguerite, it would have been broken.
and maybe glued back together again. That definitely have worked as well. But yeah, the fact that it turned into a wedding cake form was also a kind of a progression. I was just going to make a cake, and then I saw these things that I could build this tower out of and make it more majestic. And again, back to the relationship and the division of labor within long-term relationships, the domesticity, femininity connection, gendered division of labor specifically, so for me, it ended up just making sense to leave it at that, so.
Right. Again, humorous look, first look, much more subtle political statements underneath. The next slide, I'm going to mispronounce this. Maybe I should let you pronounce it. It's Super Becky. I could do the next two words, sunbird, songbird. And again, interesting materials, galvanized steel, a portrait photo of herself taken by Kevin Martin Fuller in a wet plate collodion tintype process, and a pizza box. So I was wondering if the title, obviously it's going to have a particular significance to her. I was wondering if it's a song that she sings, or it's just a reference to the fact that the picture's in a cage. And is the pizza box on which she is her picture mounted on that, or is it the bottom of the cage? And why that choice of the box, the pizza box? And did she collaborate with this particular artist in an exhibit, or just happened to be that he had done this picture? And what is that process?
Yeah. So the title is Suikerbekkie, sunbird, songbird. Yeah, so Suikerbekkie is a very small bird that you find in South Africa, well, in Africa and in Asia. And it's similar to a hummingbird, but you don't find them here. They are from the sunbird and songbird family, which the titles, I mean, the connection all kind of speak to me coming from there, where there's the sun and me singing, so songbird. So there's a little bit of symbolism in that as well. The photo is hanging like a little perch inside the cage. Kevin and I were studio neighbors in Manayunk. After graduation, I was renting a studio there at the mill, and he is a photographer and wanted to take a portrait, and he uses this very old style technique to do portrait photos. So the photo, I chose that one because of that, just a little bit of a nod to the history of women in the house, because of the old style that it was done into. And secondly, the strange thing about this photo is, and one can't necessarily see it there, but it looks like me, but it doesn't, you know. I mean, it is me, but if you, everybody who sees it, it's like, it doesn't really look like you, you know. So I felt like that little bit of that alienation was a good thing for the overall theme. And also it could be anybody, you know, it's not just me experiencing this. The symbolism of the cage is the home. You know, when you have a little bird in a cage, you're providing the bird a home and safety, but you are also clipping its wings in a way. You're taking away its freedom, you know. So there's, I think Louise Bourgeois did these paintings years ago called Women Houses, where these houses were painted as heads of these women. You could only see the hands and the bodies. That oppressive thing, again, of being kind of caught within this world of labor and caretaking that is very difficult to break out of as the domestic goddess. And then the pizza box, again, using materials that you encounter every day. It's food packaging. And it basically just so happened to fit the cage, because I couldn't make it very large. I had to take that with me to Philadelphia. And so it was just a natural choice. It kind of showed up and I'm like, yes, this is perfect, you know. The cage is not very big. As you can see, it's 12 by 10. And I'm kind of thinking, you know, you can make the cage really huge and have this tiny little bird, this tiny little photo, and that might even add or, you know, swing the symbolism a little bit, but it is very small for a very little bird. So, but this bird is a very active little bird, you know, so it's like the hummingbird, you know, they shouldn't really be caged.
We have, the next slide is also about birds. We have slide 27 is a proposition. I'm going to skip this because I'm getting a little short on time. I love this one with the bed sheet and the toilet paper and the fake money. And I would like to talk about it, but I'm going to move on to the next two that both about sort of bird related with eggs. And so this one's called Counting Chickens, and it's deconstructed paper shopping bag, egg tempera, eggshells, egg yolk, oil paint, pencil, and ink. And you know, one of the things that I thought when I was looking at this, ooh, this is probably difficult to handle all these materials. Egg shells, how did you get them to stay on? How did you control that runny egg yolk? I mean, just probably creating this piece was difficult. So do you want to tell us a little about the piece and the materials and whether or not you found that you had to fight the materials?
No, actually not really. You know, okay. I mean, you just have to prep your surface well because of the shopping bag, the paper, so that it doesn't absorb the material, because those eggs are all painted in oil. And I wanted to do them relatively realistic because I wanted again to bring the fine arts and the domestic activity kind of together. The eggs being fertility and nurturing, and the egg yolk. Well, the egg shells pulverized, and acrylic medium is a wonderful thing. So it can pretty much stick anything to anything. So that's what I used there.
Did you paint over them once you adhered them?
No, that's
No.
actually, those are just clean eggshells. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had to clean them really well. I mean, I kind of took the little membranes out and everything. And
My
then the
gosh.
writing at the bottom, you know, it.
Wait a minute. You found housework tedious? That sounds very tedious.
There's a irony in that, right? In the act of making it sort of that mundane. Yeah, but anyway,
That's
here I go, right? Yeah, and then counting chickens, 2 of them hatched. And at the bottom, it says about the expiration and that there's no returns after 280 days, which is a full-term pregnancy.
Ah,
And chopped expired at the bottom. So, you know, we have, as women, the fertility, I mean, we have so many years, and then that's speaking to what Marnie work is about too, you know, our bodies change, and and the countdown, you know, you're on sort of borrowed time. You have so many years where reproductive cycle is functional, and so.
oh, that explanation was actually very helpful. I really got more of the humor and I got sort of immersed in, look at those eggshells. How'd you put those on? So thank you for the explanation. The next one is last one of yours in the exhibit. Again, this fried eggs, oil paint portrait in frying pan eggshells, acrylic medium. So obviously a very witty picture, seems vintage Rhoda, but obviously there's a serious underpinning here. And I mean, there's lots of different ways this piece goes, depending on, you know, how you look. I didn't know, was this the frazzled mother getting kids ready and you have to get breakfast? Is this just, you just feel like you're about to burn up, you're like a burnt egg, that you're in a frying pan? I mean, it's, you know, talk about this piece.
Yeah, you know, it is a little bit of a thinking back of that, how frazzled you feel when you have small children. And in my case, even more so, being in a foreign country, having to make an adjustment on that level in a new culture, and as a new mom, and trying to just make all of this work, you know. But I also think like that egg yolk is real egg yolk, the yellow, and that muffled, you know, sort of like, she's frazzled. I think you can read it in so many ways, you know, like, what is for dinner again? You know, I read a while back, somebody said, who would have thought that one of the hardest things of being an adult is figuring out what to make for dinner every night for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So yes, it's all of these are tongue in cheek for sure, but they're also speaking to real things that we have to deal with. And then just that uncanny, the feminist uncanny, just like putting the pan with an egg on a wall instead of on a stove, you know. And
Yeah, I love your wit. I love your way of seeing things. This is, I mean, this exhibit is just really mind bending for all of us, I think. I mean, I'm very glad Dory asked me to do this Zoom. I'm very glad that I'm doing it. And I'm going to go to one of my favorite artists next, Dory. So Dory has been, you know, I knew her when she was both a student, and she's been a very active member of the Plastic Club. And when Cynthia Arkin was speaking about people that are really to be appreciated in the Plastic Club, she says, because, you know, they're there. You know, you can, and Dory's one of those people, as she is there. If you ask her, I need help on a Zoom, she's there. I have an emergency. I mean, I have to say, is one reason I said yes on this, even though I'm in Martha's Vineyard, I want to walk the dog. I think because it was Dory that asked me. And, you know, I felt I couldn't say no, she's always there. So if we look at, one of the things as Dory as an artist, that was Dory is just a wonderful helper. But as a character, you know, as an artist, I think of Dory as somebody who approaches boundaries. And she says, that's not a boundary, that's a beginning. That's something to push. And that's why I like listening to her talk about art. I like looking at her art, because the boundary is only the beginning. It doesn't, you know, she's not hemmed in. So can we see her first slide? So it's not, go to the, and then the second slide. So, all right, Dory's not going to have a one-sided, it's going to be a two-sided at least. So go back to the first slide. So when she was doing this, let's see, this was, my things are out of order for a second. This was plan design. And one of the things that I could see letters and it was drawing me in. I had to look. I said, there must be a word in here. I'm going to keep looking. I said, aha, wasn't that clever of her? It's probably plan design, you know, all compressed and in there. But this is a piece where you go to the edge. It's many different layers. You see later layers, earlier layers. She digs in, she covers up, and you go right to the borders. If you look on the other side, manifest, very different feeling. Here you have a lot of white space, you have a lot of breathing room. You have a more circular kind of movement. You have color in there, but even within that circular orb of colors, you have breathing room again, so that you just have this sense of the inside, outside, they're all part of each other. You have different applications of paint that make it feel a lot of movement. You have like splotches, you have blobs, you have some lines. So it's just a very interesting piece that keeps moving, feels, and I don't know, and it was a question I had for Dory. On the far left side, you see this, looks like a curve, a very light curve of paint. And I just wondered if it was on purpose or, but even if it was a happy accident, is that this is motion, it's continually growing, it's going to be another evolution. That's maybe one evolution, but it's moving over to something else, or it's something else is going to start. So can you talk about why you wanted to do a double-sided? And also, can you tell about that little piece on the left?
Okay, hi, Roberta. I just want to say, first of all, thank you. We're very grateful that you offered, that you said to do this. I knew you didn't offer. I asked you and you said yes. Thank you for a really nice introduction. And we're so lucky to have you. So thank you. Bob, if you don't mind going back to the clandestine one, thank you. This is, as I said here, we were trying to come up with the original 5 for this show a year ago. And that was after Roberta said that we could have the Bob Jackson Gallery in June. So that was the goal. Was we had to come up with a prompt, like, okay, we're all creating in 5 different places apart from each other. What are we going to do? And we decided to come up with a 1-word prompt in answer to the question, what does it mean to be a woman? And for me, it was rhetorical, as I wrote in the statement of the show, in that, what is it to be a woman right now? And for me, it's a culmination of being a woman for, you know, I'm 59 and 59 years. And I just sat with it. And the word that came up to me was very disappointing, but I couldn't deny it. It was the word clandestine, just an overall umbrella of, you know, a life of hiding and covering up and, you know, and being, not showing yourself and all kinds of stuff. And it said, I'm sorry, it's vulgar, but it's what I wrote later on. It just sucked that was the word, the defining word. So I said, you know what, I don't want to, if this has been the overarching umbrella of an entire life's experience, I don't want to be here anymore. So I grabbed the thesaurus and I looked for the antonym and I found the word manifest. So I flipped it over and I made that. And this is what I call one of my auto paints, so that I like to spin paint and then see what happens. And in answer to your question here, and it's the beginning of a manifestation. I have a lot of, this is like a starter that could lead to something else. And Roberta, yes, that is definitely part of the trajectory of the spinning of the paint off there in the field.
That's great. I mean, that really just is a clincher in there, whether it was a happy accident or on purpose, it was fabulous.
Most of you should know, I made 5 of them and I sent one to each of the artists because it was going to be art. Like, what is the first move? What are we going to do? And so first we talked, and then this was the first thing I did. And then I just sent one to everybody. And then before Rona went home, I had to make one for her and I gave it to her.
Well, that's nice. I mean, and it ends up just letting people say, go ahead and experiment, go ahead and just keep word playing and art playing.
Yep.
So that was great. Next one. So, okay, so we're going to show both of these radical neutrals 1 and radical neutrals 2. So, again, it looked like she was exploring in some ways the edges, going all the ways all over surface, which is radical neutrals 2, and more breathing room in radical neutrals 1, more space, more movement, playing with different size. And obviously texture is an element in there. And in contrasting sizes and shapes. So I was wondering if she had been thinking about colorful grays, or she was mixing paint and was thinking about shades. What was the impetus between for the radical neutrals 1 and 2?
Okay, like Rona and Marnie, this was me starting to figure out what I was going to do for the show. And I'm a paint mixer. I could spend 45 minutes trying to mix the perfect color for what I have in my mind's eye. And what I started to discover is by mixing, you know, the beauty and how should I say, I get a lot of joy out of mixing complements and coming to neutrals that way. It's just classic art school training, but I really, really love it. And what I called them radical neutrals because these grays are literally those 2 colors, then with a little bit of white pushed in, me trying to get them to that tipping point where you can't quite tell if it's red or it's green. And so it's going to be a body of work in the future because I really thought it was powerful. Like these grays are, maybe only I see it because I know how I mix them. They're full of that color, but you just can't quite see it. So I just find it fascinating. And it's just the beginning of something for me. And the shapes, Roberta, the shapes are, I was looking around my studio and I'm like everybody else in nature, I pick up things, I forage for things, and it's just all these beautiful rocks. And I just trace the rocks and then I filled them in with the grays.
Go ahead. I mean, you see the colors of grays when you really see it when you start seeing it's just next to a black and white that's mid a gray. And then you say, wow, these are so much more beautiful, so much more lively.
I'm glad you see that because they're lively because they're made up of those 2 crazy colors.
Right.
I guess, you know, I can't prove it, but I know what I did. You have to trust me.
We gave little crimson there and a little bit of that numeral looks like it's in green.
It was 2 different approaches. One was, you know, very structured in shape, and the other one was more of like an abstracting to see what would happen in a smushing, really.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing I like about it is it's also exploration of sides. You know, that's always an important part. What are you doing with the sides?
Yeah.
That's not to be ignored. You know, you cropped on 3 sides and we have some space on the other side. I mean, it's always, you know, somebody like Diebenkorn is always interested in the sides. And so I love looking to see what artists do with their sides. So I was interested in that a lot. You seem to be exploring what to do with the sides. So the next one, please. So we're going to go through, this one goes to 39, 40, and 41, and then we'll come back to the first one. Let's pause on that a little bit. Beautiful. A gem, literally. Beautiful. And I think is the next one that also, or that's it on that. Yeah, that one. So what I liked about this series, go back again, I loved seeing the individual pieces. You know, I didn't see the whole show, but what's really helpful to zoomed in on those, which sometimes the human eye doesn't do, because when you go to an opening or you go to a show, a lot of times you sort of breeze by, or you're crowded, or you're talking to people, or you're going to the refreshments. So it was very nice to have those individual pictures that she had. And it really does remind you of a set, you know, some things that some of your art teachers said. You may not like a piece or you like the piece, but go ahead and see what else is in there. Is there a finished piece in there, or is there a start in there? And those following slides, each of those following slides are all quite beautiful and quite lovely, and they seem themselves self-sufficient as pieces. Beautiful, gorgeous, that's a piece. Finished. Put your name on it. Next one. Put your name on it. I love, you know, you have the large area, you have the small area, you have the space, this little space in there, a big space in there, the diagonal, the curve of the shapes and the curve of the mineral, of the mica, I guess. Crystals.
Crystals, yeah.
Here you have Florida.
Italy, maybe Italy.
But I mean, you end up having sort of like, I don't know, the landscape, or you have, you know, you just have something very interesting. And again, it's feels contained. You have very interesting negative space, which is all interesting. The texture is very interesting. Sign your name. But let's go back to the first one. Okay, so what I love, when I first saw this, I go, ooh, this is really neat. And it's a large piece. It's 51 by 39. And, she's playing with a lot of different materials. And the thing that struck me is it felt like a play with space. I felt like I was playing with interior and, but exterior. I felt like it was inside a building. If you look at the gray, vertical slats of different values, I felt like a floor, the two different shades of the light, white, almost like walls, and the other wall, the silver wall on the left. I felt like it was sort of inside, but not quite, because it's not a real space. It wasn't, didn't feel like the inside exactly. And then you have that wispy gray area, smoky, hazy area that goes from left to right, makes you feel like maybe you're outside. It feels like you're going outside. It definitely creates some space. And then you have this very colorful area that's floating in there, and sort of the pieces talking to each other, but look really lovely with the grays and in that space. So it's a very interesting composition. It's a puzzle, and yet it's also beautiful. So do you want to address this and the pieces?
Oh, sure. Thank you, Roberta. I love hearing your what you see all the time. The title is telling you exactly what's happening. And I guess if you had to label this, because people do like to be able to understand what they're looking at, this might fit into the magical realism category, perhaps. She's pulling ether. So the in-between space, the liminal space, this space that we don't see, that doesn't exist. And that's on the left side. And it was really interesting to just do the stripe there. And I wanted to depict what would this other, magical realm look like. And those are sheets of big pieces of mica that I put onto the oil paint. And the structure came from, I did a large series of small works last year called Fleur de Claire, or Claire Flowers. That's the translation. And like clairsentient, clairvoyant, that kind of thing. And basically the idea is these diminutive small pieces, these little flowers that were kind of manifesting themselves. Maybe they started out like a little Rorschach-y, and then I would bring my hand in and start pulling them out and trying to find their personalities. And I finished that series, and I wanted to get back to larger scale now that I had a studio again. And I wondered, could I do that in a larger scale? Would that be possible? Because it's very different to work on something that's 8 by 10 inches, and then will it translate? And this is what I did. And I was working on this when this show started to come together. And this is where I'll speak about fleeing forward, in that, let me see, how can I put this? It's nice to, once I made the decision that it wasn't going to be clandestine anymore, I realized, well, then if it's not going to be clandestine anymore, then I'm no longer running from something, I'm running to something. And that came from Patricia, she's here, when she said Fuite en Avant. And I'm sorry if I butchered it, Patricia, I tried. The translation is sometimes considered negative in French, but I did some research on the translation, and there's a couple other interpretations about it. And I chose to really stick with the positive idea that you are going towards something wanted, as opposed to running away from something unwanted. So this piece for me is that she's pulling ethers, like she's bringing this magic with her. And just the way that it ended up, that's her hand like this, and she's pulling it over the top of her hand into the room. And as I was doing this and thinking about how I depict it, I was looking at, if you want to go to one of the close-ups, Bob, right, thank you. At the edges, it looked like lace, like the way that I was using oil paint and then ink and watercolor. And just the way it dried on, that's a piece of Japanese rice paper I put up over the backboard. Just by putting that paper onto the canvas, started to create this architecture, which is something I was doing in the small spaces. And then I had to paint the floor. And just like Rona, I was letting the painting a little bit guide me of what it seemed to want. And so, thank you, Bob, that's perfect. You can see those lacy edges, and I didn't want to obliterate them. And what
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much. I started to paint little dots, like I just said, this thing needs some bling, it wants some jewels, right? So if you'll see just the actual paint, like the red, and I did the red and dots in this case. And then I just realized the next day, it's like, it's not enough. I've got silver oil paint. It needs something sparkly, right? Did the silver, you'll see the silver oil paint there. Then I was over at my friend's house about a week later. And I don't know about anybody else, but when I get an idea about something, and the first thought that pops into my head and it says, no, you can't do that, I know I have to do it. And what I was over my friend's house, and on the floor, he was making some jewelry. He had a little container of some Swarovski crystals. And I woke up seeing them. And the first thing that popped into my head was this painting back on the wall, wanting more bling. And that's when the thought came in, you can't do that. And I just had to sit with that. Why can't I do this? Because it felt like shame. I felt shame. I'm a woman who wants to put crystals on her oil painting. I can't do that. And then it was weird that you're not supposed to do something like that for, a real oil painting or something. And I started remembering all the other artists, and I took my permission from Mickalene Thomas, and I think his name is Devon Shimon. I forget. Sorry, I can't say his last name right. He was one of the visiting artists that came to PAFA, and he glitter, jewels, everything, and plenty of other artists do it too. So it was interesting that my first reaction was that I couldn't do it, and then I had to do it. So that's
boundaries and fleeing from boundaries.
Exactly. So then I had a ball doing this. It's an abundance of crystals.
It's a lovely piece. And I love, like I said, I love the close-ups really a lot. Each one of those, just sign it. They're lovely pieces.
Well, what I discovered is I had to do that because when you take a picture of the whole painting, you just really can't get the impact of the crystals unless you're, it's a video.
Right. But what it is the selection of the area and the cropping of the area is in itself a way of creating art. And so what you did in your photography is create new works of art. And each of those subsequent slides are beautiful pieces, I think self-contained. So partially because you're cropping and it's the artist's eye. You could have had that moved over, you could have had it a different way. Your cropping ended up being, quite magical, to use it's to be magical.
I appreciate that, Roberta. And I think I'm thinking now, like, why did I choose those lacy edges? It's like, I was so proud of my restraint not to fill in all those little holes. Like, don't put the crystals in the holes. That's what I just kept screaming at myself. And I think it really made the painting better.
It's lovely. We're going to do the same thing that looking at her next one is Dreambird and looking at 39, 40, and 41. So that's the whole, looking at it as a whole, and the next two slides then. And then that's a close-up of an area and a close-up of another area, the next slide. So, okay, and we'll go back to the first. So just with the slide, if you're not seeing it, you would not have noticed that kind of texture that you captured. And again, particularly the third slide felt like a really complete abstract painting. And even the other did, with the funny little feet sticking through there. I mean, you didn't know they were feet, but all of a sudden you have this little orange. You go, what's this orange? But so this is called Dreambird. I said to someone, do you see this? And we were one. So this seemed to be very different, and you'll explain why it is or isn't from the other pieces you submitted, because we see a bird, though a very humorous looking one, and a very solemn and seemingly profound saying that seems out of keeping with that silly bird, or to me he seems silly. I mean, I may, with that plumage, that pink plumage is like, whoa, and that pink tail with that, bright yellow, he just seems like really full of himself there. And so you have this contrast with this very funny bird with this very profound saying. And so it's that maybe it's like your first piece that you showed, is that you have a front and a back, and this title is sort of like a front and a back. But so if you can explain this piece.
I'd love to. I really would. It'll make sense, I promise.
Oh no, it's fine, even if it doesn't.
Well, okay. I remembered something about it too, and I just want to add that in a minute. First of all, this is a dream that I had. I had a dream, and I know that there are things that they call garbage dump dreams, where things that you see in your life just end up in your dream somehow. And I don't know if this means anything to anyone else, but they brought back for one season Murphy Brown starring Candice Bergen. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. And they brought her back right around the time of the Women's March had happened in 2016, 2017. And it was miraculous how they designed what would Murphy Brown later in life wear as a pink pussy hat to the Women's March. And it was a gladiator helmet with pink feathers. Okay. And the thing is, that image I got into my dream, and I'm in this dream and I'm just walking along. And if you look at the bottom of the painting, the bird's feet are on my arm. So I literally traced my arm there. The bird, I was in the dream and I was very important. I was walking very quickly and the background was blurring by. So it was imperative to make it look like the background was blurring by. So that's what I tried to do. And the bird landed on my arm and he landed on my arm. And this is the dialogue from the dream. I said to someone, do you see this? And we were one. And when I say we were one, the bird's feet were starting to merge into my arm. It wasn't painful or bloody or anything like that, but that's the dream. That's the painting.
That's interesting. Well, it is, yeah, and I mean, very Dory with the texture, the love of texture, and the next one, and yeah, and the really nice, beautiful abstract painting part. So the next part is her last ones are going to clump together also. It's going to be a series of 5 monotypes. So it'll be 42 through 46. If we can go through them fast, and then we'll go back. Okay, so except for the first one, which has rows of horizontal and vertical circular yellow shades of various densities, you know, you know, it's sort of like in a grid. The other monotypes display the circular pattern of curvy strokes of paint, often very textured. So my question to you is to address it as a series, is what were you exploring in this series? Are these monotypes composed in part by printing? The reason I'm asking is in terms of monoprints are oftentimes a printing process. So I don't know if in fact you use printing or just because you're just one of a kind, you're called monoprints. So could you talk about the series?
Oh, yes, I can. I did do some printmaking and I do like to do printmaking when I'm in a printmaking lab. I don't do it in my studio. This is a process that I do. Again, I call these my mono paints, is that every time I'm working on a series, I use, if you notice, this is the paint. You'll see the radical neutral grays are in the middle there. And the yellow paint is from how I did the 2 corners on the big painting. I'm pulling ether. So I'll use the paint and I like to make these handmade prints, so to speak, by spinning paint onto the paper, and they go along with the, you know, with the works, the big oil paintings.
Did you apply the paint by turning the paper over and using the earlier work as a substrate, or did you with a brush or
No,
some
I
other
did.
tool?
I took another, like some other object and put the paint on the object and then spun it into the paper. And then I'll go back and forth and maybe press 2 of the papers together and pull them apart and just try to find some sort of experiment that I like.
Okay, so there is actually a printmaking process that's going on.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, I found that out in school, that every time you press something into a piece of paper, you're printing, apparently.
Right, correct. Well, that was very interesting. So I know we're pretty close to the time, but people may have questions. I thank the 3 artists for their in-depth discussions and their sharing their thoughts and their processes. They're definitely an inspiration to all of us. And, you know, we're very lucky to have you both have done the exhibit and then to have done the Zoom and shared your thoughts, because the problem with an exhibit and an opening is you have no time to talk to the artist. And this was really quite wonderful. Or did I miss something?
Yeah, we might not have.
Oh, right.
Tell everybody quickly that if you go to the exhibition, there's still a bunch of them left. There's a takeaway of flower essences I made. This is Bob, if you play that just for a second, if it'll play, this is how I made the flower essences. These are the snowdrops. Oh, no sound. I tuned them in a singing bowl during auspicious celestial events. And this was, as you can see, gathered on the vernal equinox. And there's a QR code on the labels that'll take you to a webpage where you can watch this. It's okay, Bob, there's no sound, it's okay.
my comment to Dory on this was for me, a very conceptual kind of art where you need to know, it's really the artist, what's in the artist's mind that is important to knowing what really this is about, because, you know, the viewer looking at it is to say, oh, nice flowers. Or, you know, I mean,
Sure.
that's the thing about conceptual art, is part of understanding conceptual art is a lot of time understanding what the artist had in mind. So I know you had a lot in mind about the different equinoxes and things like that.
It was just a really fortuitous spring and I just took advantage of it.
So do people have some questions that they would like to ask some of the individual artists? You could always just email them, or email Dory, or email the Plastic Club, and we'll get the questions to the artists. So if there's no questions, I'm gonna say we're gonna leave. And again, as I really want to thank Bob Lee, who helped co-host this. Dory, you were the other co-host on this. These things don't happen if we don't have people that do this audio visual business. I presume you put the exhibit up, Dory, on the slideshow.
Oh yeah, I did the slideshow, yes.
Yeah, but that's, you know, you need somebody that also has the technical abilities, not me.
You know, I think I'm probably speaking for everyone when I say it's going to take us a while to take all that in.
Yeah.
Before we can even come up with any questions.
Yeah.
But that was a fantastic show.
Yeah, I mean,
thank you very much
Thank you,
to all three of you, and thank you, Roberta, for being our MC.
Yes.
So looking forward to seeing you all in exhibits at the Plastic Club. There's one coming up, and just look for the monthly open calls. Your work is more than welcome. And you could also join the club, but you don't have to. You can use your exhibits online. If you're way off in the far west there, Rona, but it doesn't matter. I'm in Martha's Vineyard. I'm going to just put mine online.
Yeah, we should probably mention that there is an open call right now.
Right.
If you go to our website, registration is open, and submissions are open for the online portion, and drop-offs for any physical art is the last weekend of the month.
And this is perfect for you, Marty, because it's about the theme. It's about the ocean and the seas. I can't remember the exact title, but it's like the ocean and the seas.
The Life Aquatic.
Yeah.
Is the title
So there you are. Anyone that you do other than the road would be fine.
Exactly.
And then our next Zoom event is later this month on the 22nd, which is our first ever Zoom book salon. We've done live book salons in the past, but it's our first Zoom. So two important reasons you might want to go is if you love books and like talking about books and hearing about books. And the other reason is we're going to be talking about where to take the series and where it could go. So you could have you can have a part in deciding that. So that's Wednesday.
Always exciting things. Always exciting things at the Plastic Club.
Bob, I have a question. You might not know this, maybe you do. If people want to go see the show, it's up till the end of June. How do they have to go without making a private appointment? Do they have to go when the workshops are on, and then the doors are open? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me modify that, because actually, when I make arrangements for, I always see Michael when I'm going to have an artist pick up their work during workshop times. He almost would rather, I mean, I would say is notified Michael also in CC, because a lot of times he likes to go and open the door and not bother the monitors. He's very solicitous of the monitors. So you know, for when the workshops are, but also make sure that you CC Michael. And he'll get back to you.
Best way is probably to send an email to info@plasticclub.org.
And best is if you could get them all at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.